Welcome to our 30th Wonderspace journey. My name is Steve Cole, and since September 2020, I have been asking the same 6 questions to people from around the world. The questions revolve around life and wonder, places of reset and stories of hopefulness. This week we are on a nighttime orbit over Europe, and to experience these views with us, in this ultimate window seat, we welcome Zarlasht Halaimzai, who is the founder of the Refugee Trauma Initiative. Her story is remarkable and inspiring, and I so recommend you listen to the full version on the podcast, which you will find on our website and on most podcast platforms. For this shortened video orbit, Zarlasht starts by giving us a glimpse into her life story so far.
A glimpse into my life story so far would have to start in Afghanistan, because it's everything that I do and who I am now and the way that I interact with the world. That foundation was very much set in a country where there is a very old, ancient history that informs the identity of Afghan people. There is a very strong value system, a lot of which is based on generosity and hospitality, which is very much part of my ethos. And I was born at a time where these things were being threatened from external forces. So I remember growing up in a household where people lived in this very collective, caring way, and in a place where you don't have social security. So the protection and what you rely on is your community around you. And so you spend a lot of time nurturing that community, and getting through really difficult things as a community, and then healing together as a community. And so I grew up in those circumstances, and from when I was born till I left at age 11, I saw the deterioration of the situation in Afghanistan. But coupled with that, I also saw how communities every time tried their best to rise up and to meet some incredibly difficult circumstances, anything from daily bombings to lack of, food wasn't available for days, or we couldn't have access to drinking water. And every time something like that happened to families like mine, I'm the eldest of 5 kids, so it's an average family. We're living in a house with our grandparents, and, my parents are trying their best to bring up their children under these circumstances. Every time something like that happens, communities kind of just came together and tried to work out a way of surviving as a collective. And that left a huge impression on me. Experiencing disaster in one way, but also seeing how you could respond to that, and how you could actually respond to that with a lot of integrity and a lot of dignity. When the situation in Afghanistan for my family became completely unsustainable, and we had to make a choice between staying there and possibly dying, or leaving and trying to survive, and this was an incredibly difficult decision that my parents made, in haste, and it wasn't sort of a deliberated decision over a period of time. It was a reaction to what was happening outside of our front door. So we decided to leave Kabul and make our way north, first to Mazar Sharif, and then we crossed the border into Uzbekistan. And because there was really not a plan for what to do other than to kind of work out whether it was a good idea to wait around the border for violence to stop so we could go back home, or to try and find somewhere else to settle in. And this period of trying to work this out took 4 years, because the violence in Afghanistan kept getting worse and worse and worse. And in 1996, 4 years after my family left Afghanistan, the Taliban took over the country and the situation became exponentially worse. They essentially made women invisible. They brought in some incredibly inhumane punishments and tried to really erase society in the country and rule it in this very brutal, tyrannical way. And so when that happened, my mom, who was a teacher and who had spent her entire life trying to keep children in school and particularly focusing on girls and making sure that they got an education, this was a nightmare for her. So we decided not to go back because we couldn't see that being a home for us, and we couldn't see that we would be safe under the circumstances. So my family immigrated to the UK, where we became refugees, and and that was an incredibly difficult experience because all of a sudden you're plonked into a country, you don't speak the language, you don't understand what people say, you have no idea what people mean when they say it's raining cats and dogs. You're like, is it? So there's all these kind of weird things that you have to navigate, and it takes a really long time to figure all those cultural references, all the kind of social cues, or how to create social capital for yourself in a country like this. So I went to school and then I went to university, but the whole time I knew that I wanted to do something that was about helping people who, through no fault of their own, were put in circumstances that they couldn't control. That was something that had made a really big impression on me when I was a child, because suddenly, on a click of a finger, everything kind of flips upside down and you really, really don't have any control over it. And people find this experience, I think the vast majority of people find this experience incredibly destabilizing, because you have to remake all your stories, your references, the things that, you kind of have to remake your past in some ways, especially for countries that have gone through a war, but you also have to imagine a completely different future. And that's a really hard thing for people to do. So that was something that I lived with in my teens and 20s, and after working for different things and spending some time in Jordan and in Pakistan and in Turkey working in different emergency responses, I decided to set up Refugee Trauma Initiative, an organization that focuses specifically on the emotional fallout of experiencing violence and experiencing displacement as a result of violence. And we've been working in Greece now for 5 years. This month is our 5th birthday. Happy birthday, RTI. And, it's been an incredibly inspiring, difficult, painful experience to support people and have that privilege of seeing people find their resilience and really take care of themselves, but also be witness to the brutalization that is going on in our world today, and how gratuitous that is and how much it impacts people. And how long it takes for people to recover and to reconcile themselves. In the time that we've been operational with RTI, we've supported thousands of refugees in forms of collective healing, therapy groups, counselling for families, early childhood support. And the work that we've done is very much informed by the identities and the histories of people that we work with. So it's not, sort of parachuting a Eurocentric psychological model on communities. It's very much a way of co-creating what collective healing spaces are for people, and then using the wisdom and the resilience and the skills that exist in the community to make those places really work for those who attended. And this work has received quite a lot of attention from different organizations. The World Health Organization has cited us as an example of of best practice. We've been covered by various international organizations, but the one that I feel very proud of is being awarded an Obama Fellowship for the work that RTI has done. And this was, totally unexpected and completely blew my mind. Especially because 20,000 people from 190 countries had applied to become an Obama Fellow, and they selected 20, which was, an extraordinary achievement for the organization and for me. But also, I was so happy that a topic like trauma that refugees are experiencing will have that sort of a platform where, I can talk to people that have much, much bigger microphones than I do about a subject that people need to listen to. My story of hopefulness concerns someone called Gabrielle Rifkind, who is a psychotherapist by training, but she has spent the last 25 years working on conflict resolution. And her idea is that, to make peace, to end conflict, you really need to bring the differences of the people into a room, and you need to have a way of resolving those with empathy and allowance of people to grieve, to kind of express anger. All the kind of things that we do in a therapy room is necessary when you bring two warring factions together, and that the only way to reconcile is to really try and understand the other person's perspective, just as a human being, not as someone that's attacking you or, is a geopolitical rival, but as someone who on the other side is trying to raise a family and has aspirations for the future. And she's done this work in lots of different countries, like in Israel and Palestine. She's worked in, the Middle East, and she's worked in Spain with the Catalan separatists. And I think it's exactly what we need when we're thinking about conflict resolutions and peacemaking. We need to understand the psychology of the people and why they get stuck in positions that perpetuate violence, and what can we do aside from these, rooms where lots of men sit together with lots of egos to try and negotiate deal. How can we move away from that model of peacemaking to actually creating a space where people can express their vulnerability? And I don't mean that in a sort of kumbaya type of way, but express that I am afraid for my child, and that's why I am taking this position, and I'm afraid for this. Or I think that's, I don't think without that you can make peace, and part of that type of peacemaking also involves bringing other people in the room. So you have women in the room, you have people who are young people in the room whose future is at stake, and then I think that can shift the paradigm to something that could actually work in terms of making peace between different warring factions. And I think if we can't do that, if we aren't able to come up with some sort of a framework for resolving conflict without violence, I think we're just gonna continue seeing more and more and more misery and desperation in the world.
To find out more about the Refugee Trauma Initiative, go to refugeetrauma.org. In her story of hopefulness, Zarlasht spoke about Gabrielle Rifkind from the Oxford Process. They can be found at oxfordprocess.com. To listen to the previous 29 Wonderspace interviews, the website is ourwonder.space. I want to thank Zarlasht for joining us on this Wonderspace, and I hope you can join us next week for more wonders and stories of hopefulness.